So I think a video that needs to be made, perhaps, is in relation to how we look at the state, and maybe a comparative analysis to more traditional ways of thinking, how it might be sort of a stick point at this point in evolution, and that we need to maybe find ways to go beyond it. So if we look at, say, fundamentalist styles of belief around the world, in that sense, it was very fitting to agrarian cultures in which, indeed, there was many cycles, and cycles mattered, and there wasn't much movement, and people were, sort of in a particular place for most of their life, if not all of their life, in multiple generations. So there's this kind of static quality to it. Things never change. So most of these religious traditions have this notion of static nature of God. God is static, not moving. In the modern world, if we haven't outright gotten rid of, something transcendent, then there tends to be something of an evolutionary context to it. And I'm very much of the mind that we should potentially try to include the best of the past. I have strong beliefs in something bigger than myself, and in many ways it has a lot of the context of the traditional notions, but makes a lot of room all the same for some of the modern realizations as well. When we look at the state has these qualities of being the omnipotent element of our existence. Taxes and death are givens, as it were. But who are we getting taxed by? Really, it's the government, right? Again, I'm not undermining the evolutionary context of this, in that going to 1776, it was the greatest breakthrough, potentially, in human history, in some important sense, to have a place for freedom, equality, liberty, to whatever extent it did provide that. These notions fermented through the people's minds and changed the kind of ways of living tremendously, in that we've seen at that point great productivity gains, great industriousness, great autonomy, things that hadn't been very much available prior to that point of time. However, in a time of great automation, a time when work is not as stable as it once was by any means, and looks to be like it's going to get less and less stable, handing over our powers to centralized authorities seems dated. I think most would see that if they see the complexities of these things, in that these people are guaranteed high-paying positions, but if you're trying to compete in the marketplace, trying to be in retail or produce something of worth, you are at a great barrier to actually do that. So there's a piggybacking, this kind of postmodern academic piggybacking on the productivity gains of the modernist person to some important sense. So it seems that we need something that can decentralize these power structures in important ways, and guarantee, maybe in some ways, a basic living, because those productivity gains have been given to us in many important respects. And it's kind of, I don't want to be a narcissistic millennial here, but in some important sense, it has been the sweat of our ancestors that have created these autonomous capacities for machines to be where they're at. So it should be a shared wealth, in my opinion, for the most part. But at this point, it's a very centralized reality that the gains are going to a very few, and it's getting greater and greater consolidation for that. So things like, but on the other hand, I'm gonna make the other side of this argument stick. So we've made space for people that have traditionalist beliefs, right? So is there a way, and I think I have some ideas, is there a way in which we could have freedom of governance such that if you want to live in a traditional democracy, there's a space for that? If you want to live in something more like a divine rulership, such as a kingdom, is there a way we can make room for that? And now this word's going to sound scary because of the context that we have built around it, but I think it's a lot less scary than you might imagine. So there's this notion called panarchy, and anarchy is kind of, well, it's a complex idea in many respects, but it's without government in many regards. Panarchy is a situation in which governments are allowed to evolve in the context that people in that area want them to evolve. So if you are going to sign yourself over to divine rulership, that's okay. You and your family can have the right to do that. But in another jurisdiction, we might have a libertarian type living arrangement or governance, I guess you could say. But the idea is that you can create, within the context of a greater space, an openness of governance structures, or not lack thereof, if that's what you so desire, I suppose. I think what we might come to realize is that some minimal amount of governance, a minarchy or something like that, is actually reasonable. I think people will move towards that on the whole. I think that might be the way the average person would go. But there's going to be people that won't want that, absolutely. And we should make space for that, just as we make space for belief systems. So I hope that made some sense. Be well.